My name is Marina. I was 29 the year this happened. Christmas morning carried its usual rituals, Margaret's cinnamon rolls coming out slightly burnt, Douglas insisting on lighting the fireplace even with the thermostat holding steady at 72, and Jenna breezing in just late enough to be adored for it. The tree blinked from the corner, dressed in the same gold bulbs I grew up with. I knew every crack in those ornaments, every chip on the ceramic reindeer, flaws we never mentioned, as if tradition demanded silence. My mother, Margaret Dutcher, moved through the room like a queen in her velvet robe, cheeks pink, smile wide. In her hand, a perfectly wrapped gold box tied with satin ribbon. She turned toward Jenna, my younger sister, the daughter she always seemed to claim more than me. "Go ahead, open it," she urged, glowing. Jenna, in her rose-colored sweater and flawless blowout, gave one of her dramatic gasps before she even touched the ribbon. That was her specialty, she'd been doing it since childhood, as if every moment were an audition for a Hallmark movie. Slowly, she peeled the paper back. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a silver key. She squealed. I didn't have to look to know my father's grin was already spreading. "We bought her a house," Margaret said, her voice catching like she'd just performed a miracle. Jenna threw her arms around them both, squealing again. I smiled too, but it wasn't joy, just the reflex of someone who'd been rehearsing it her whole life. Then Margaret turned to me, her eyes soft, her voice low. "You'll understand someday," she whispered. But I already did. Douglas placed an envelope on my lap, plain and unmarked, as quietly as someone setting down a bill. No ceremony, no applause, just the sound of paper brushing fabric, thick enough to smother velvet and ribbon alike. I didn't open it immediately. It sat there, fragile and humiliating, not just a reminder of what I lacked but of how far they'd go to make that lack appear normal. Meanwhile, Jenna still squealed, holding her key high as if it were cut from diamonds. Margaret dabbed her eyes, talking about granite countertops and walk-in closets. I glanced at the envelope again. No card. Just my name scribbled in my mother's looping cursive, the same handwriting she'd used for decades on Christmas tags and PTA flyers. I traced the flap with my finger, already knowing what I'd find inside. I was 9 the first time I baked my own birthday cupcakes, dry, oily, too much cocoa. Margaret helped, though only because Jenna had ballet and didn't want the kitchen smelling weird. I woke that morning hopeful, imagining balloons, candles, maybe a card. Instead, the kitchen was empty. Margaret hummed in the next room, brushing Jenna's hair. That same year, Jenna had a backyard party with ponies. Everyone came, even neighbors we couldn't stand, bringing glitter-wrapped gifts for a child who wasn't me. By middle school, I stopped expecting anything. When I graduated with honors, Margaret didn't come. Jenna had a regional dance competition. All I got was a text, "So proud. Sorry we couldn't be there. Go get them." When I won first place at the state science fair with my working hydroelectric dam, Douglas showed up 15 minutes late and slipped out before the awards were finished. He had golf. But when Jenna booked a 30-second shampoo commercial? They threw a dinner party with champagne, replaying the ad like it was a Pulitzer. There's one memory I revisit too often. Senior year, academic awards night. I'd worked brutally hard, 2 part-time jobs, a 4.0 GPA, papers written until my eyes burned. They called my name for the top scholarship in front of a full auditorium. As I crossed the stage, I scanned the crowd. Margaret sat in the front row, scrolling her phone. When I stepped down clutching my certificate, she looked up just long enough to say, "Well, at least she's good at something." Loud enough for other parents to hear. If you've ever been betrayed by the very people who should have been your loudest supporters, you know exactly how deep that cuts. For years, I wondered if maybe I imagined it all, if I was just the bitter sibling in the shadow of someone shinier. But favoritism doesn't whisper. It carves. It cuts into holidays, dinners, milestones, every place love should have lived. That Christmas morning, watching Jenna hold a house key while I sat with a lifeless envelope, I stopped doubting myself. I knew. It wasn't the moment to speak. Not yet. But I felt the moment was coming. Finally, I opened the envelope, careful as if unwrapping a wound I already knew would scar. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No message, no card. Just a printed job listing. Admin assistant. Regional insurance office. Entry level, hourly. At the bottom, in my father's sharp, controlled handwriting, thought this might be more your speed. My fingers went cold as I stared at it. No one noticed. Jenna was still talking about French doors. Margaret was already refilling her coffee. I folded the paper twice, slid it back under my leg. The room buzzed with noise, but none of it reached me. They hadn't given me less because they forgot. They gave me less because they believed I needed less. Because I'd always figured it out. Paid my own rent, carried my own boxes, answered my own calls from the school nurse. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Not the insult, but the certainty with which they delivered it. This wasn't malice, it was consistency. I hadn't planned to come back home, but guilt wears disguises. When Margaret called twice in 1 week, saying, "Your father can't lift boxes, he's hurting," I caved. It wasn't the request, it was the tone. Sweet, syrupy, laced with accusation. As if refusing would prove I was selfish. As if decades of quiet dismissal could be erased with one Saturday favor. I said yes. Against my better judgment, I drove the 4 hours back home, pulling into the same driveway Douglas still trimmed with ruler-straight hedges. The house smelled exactly as it always had, lemon polish, overcooked roast, and that faint, smoky edge no one ever admitted noticing. Jenna wasn't there. "She's busy," Margaret sighed, her tone somehow twisting the absence into my responsibility. I smiled, nodded, said all the right words. By Saturday night, the checklist was complete. I'd helped Douglas haul bins from the garage, sat through Margaret's complaints about Jenna's boyfriend, and endured a dinner where every road led back to lake house renovations. By 10 p.m., I couldn't sleep. The guest room, the one that used to be mine, still displayed my dusty soccer trophies like proof I once existed there. Yet the walls felt closer now, as if they remembered every word I'd swallowed within them. Wandering barefoot, I noticed Douglas's office door was ajar. That alone was unusual. He treated the room like a sacred vault, blinds drawn, drawers locked, passwords on everything. And yet, here it was open. The safe, tucked behind the filing cabinet, sat with its door loose. For the first time, unguarded. I should have closed it. Walked away. Pretended it was an oversight. But something rooted me there, a quiet tug asking, "What have they locked away from you that Jenna already knows?" I knelt, careful. Rows of manila folders, perfectly labeled, tax returns, deeds, bank statements. Some familiar, some not. Then I found it, a sealed envelope marked in Douglas's sharp hand, to be opened upon death. My breath faltered. Still, I opened it. Inside was a will. Not the even-split version they paraded years ago when Jenna turned 21. This was different. My name came first. Next to it, a parcel number. A property I'd never heard mentioned. Confused, I checked the next page. A deed, purchased in my name. Attached, financial authorizations bearing my signature. Except the slant was wrong. The R's curl didn't match. Someone had signed for me. And the bank activity showed it hadn't been the only time. My name had been borrowed, shifted, manipulated like furniture in a house I wasn't allowed to enter. Sitting under the muted glow of the desk lamp, I tried to piece it together. It wasn't only secrecy, it was storytelling. They had built another life on paper, written me into it without asking. I said nothing. The next morning, Margaret poured my coffee with cheerful theatrics, asking if I'd found a real job yet, before launching into Jenna's latest idea, a lifestyle podcast about authenticity. Douglas barely looked up from his toast. I smiled, nodded, stayed in character. By noon, I was packed and gone, muttering something vague about work. Back in my apartment, I pulled every credit report, checked every account linked to my name. The truth unraveled quickly. The house was real, bought 6 years earlier through a trust tied to my social security number. The parcel matched exactly. And it didn't stop there. Transfers, reallocations, signatures that weren't mine. I called a lawyer friend from college, someone who specialized in estates. I didn't tell her the full story, just sent documents, lined up neatly, as if that would make them easier to believe. 2 days later, she called back. Her voice was calm, her words razor-sharp. "Marina, if you wanted to pursue fraud, you'd have a case. But that's not what you're after, is it?" She was right. I wasn't after revenge. I wanted clarity, then control. We dug, quietly. And the picture became almost absurd. On paper, I was wealthier than I had ever imagined. Not extravagant, but substantial: the house, an investment account, even ties to a family holding company shielding assets during Jenna's failed ventures. The lake house detail was the most damning. Their crown jewel, their legacy, had been mortgaged in secret 3 years prior to fund Jenna's skincare line. Douglas had likely thought he could cover it before anyone noticed. He couldn't. By the time I unearthed the deed, the property was already scheduled for auction. So I bought it. Not as Marina Dutcher, but through a shell LLC, my lawyer acting as proxy. The purchase was clean, legal, irrefutable. Weeks later, the deed was in my hands. For the first time in my life, I held something they wanted. It wasn't about the house. It was about rewriting history, proving that I had seen every inch of their neglect and finally refused to carry it. They still didn't know. Margaret texted about Christmas plans, asking if I'd bring wine, gushing about Jenna's new boyfriend. Douglas emailed another job listing, subject line, something with stability. I answered nothing. Because silence, when it's mine, isn't weakness. It's leverage. And I knew the moment was coming. Christmas arrived again, wrapped in familiarity. Same wreath on the door, same chipped reindeer mugs, the fireplace burning just enough to dry the air but not warm it. Jenna was already posing in her new cashmere, hugging herself as if the room owed applause. Douglas stood by the mantel with his coffee, scanning the space like he was taking inventory. Margaret drifted about humming carols off-key, asking whether the cinnamon rolls were baked enough. I slipped my gift under the tree. A plain white box, no tag, no ribbon. Just wait. We moved through the motions. Jenna unwrapped a designer bag, gasped on cue. Margaret cried. Douglas chuckled. A toast followed, to new chapters and dream homes. And I waited. I nodded once, lifted my cup, took a slow sip, and waited. Finally, it was my turn. I passed the box across the table to Douglas, careful as if it might shatter in my hands. He accepted it with both palms, eyebrows lifting when he felt how weightless it was. His lips curved in that knowing grin, the kind that says, "This can't be serious." Jenna laughed under her breath. Socks. Definitely socks. Douglas didn't rush. Not because he cared, but because he didn't. He slid the lid open like it was routine. Inside, an envelope, sealed in wax. For just a second he hesitated, then cracked the seal and drew out the folded pages. His expression stayed neutral, until it didn't. A faint tightening around his eyes, then the blood drained from his face. He skimmed the first page, then read it again more slowly. The notarized deed. My name. The property. The lake house. Then the next page, the forged signature, the attorney's warning in bold. His hand twitched, just enough to notice. Margaret leaned closer, still smiling. She caught the words, her grin collapsed like mist against glass. She turned toward me, eyes wide. "Claire Iyer, what is this?" I met her stare, steady. Exactly what it looks like. She blinked hard. Douglas said nothing, just sat frozen, papers trembling in his grip. Margaret's lips parted, closed, then parted again. You didn't tell me. It wasn't a question. Her voice cracked, not loud, not dramatic. Just broken. Jenna clutched her purse tighter, like it could shield her. She looked around for an explanation no one gave. The silence thickened, sticky and slow, seeping into every corner of the room. I rose, brushed my sweater smooth, and spoke casually, as if thanking them for coffee. I won't be sharing the lake house. Not this time. No answer. Only the faint rustle of paper as Douglas kept reading, desperate to twist the words into something else. Margaret took a small step away from him, as if distance could soften betrayal. Her eyes flickered between the documents and his face. She wasn't angry yet. Anger takes energy. This was worse, quiet devastation, the kind that comes when a story you've built your whole life around splits in two, and you're left clutching fragments. Jenna stayed silent, clutching her handbag like a child holds a stuffed toy in a thunderstorm. No script, no map. She'd never been told the truth either. I let the silence do its work. I didn't need to fill it. They weren't going to apologize, or explain, or even ask how I knew. Some truths don't need to be spoken. When I reached for my coat, Margaret flinched. I didn't rush, just moved like someone finished with their part. At the door, I paused. Not for effect, just to see them one last time. Douglas, still staring at the deed, knuckles pale. Margaret collapsing by inches. Jenna mute for once. And me, still standing. Just so we're clear, I said quietly. I won't be giving it back. Not the house. Not my name. Not anymore. Then I opened the door. The December air swept in sharp and cold, like water after a dam bursts. Honest. Cleansing. By evening, snow began to fall, soft, relentless, muffling the world in silence only winter understands. I settled into an armchair by the window of the lake house, my lake house. A blanket wrapped around my shoulders, coffee cooling at my side. No music, no voices, just the wood creaking as wind scraped against the siding. The place wasn't perfect. The floors needed replacing, the chimney smoked, the thermostat stuttered. But it was mine. Not a gift. Not inherited. Taken back. They never intended for me to find it, let alone claim it. They counted on my silence, the quiet one, the capable one, the fixer. This didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. Like finally breathing after years of holding air in my lungs without realizing it. I considered calling someone, just to say it out loud, but I didn't. Some stories don't need witnesses. Maybe Margaret will call one day, her voice heavy with regret rehearsed too late. Maybe Douglas will mail a newspaper clipping, pretending normalcy. Maybe Jenna will send a meme. Maybe not. I don't care. This wasn't anger. It was survival. A line drawn, permanent. The snow kept falling, steady and certain, blanketing the railings, the trees, the edges of the lake. And the strangest part? Now that I hold the one thing they prized most, I don't even want it. But they needed to know I could take it. Just like they chipped away at me, piece by piece, wrapped it in silence, and called it love. If you've ever walked out of a room and never looked back, just leave a dot. I'll know you were here.